and welcome to my review of Mr. Miracle issue number 8, written by Tom King and art by Mitch Gerads. Received a score of 9.1 on Comic Book Roundup from critics and a score of 8.8 from users. Here's the plot summary, courtesy of Comic Book Roundup. This issue, it's back to Apocalypse and a return to war. Scott Free is engaged in a bloody battle against Darkseid's forces, this time without Barda by his side, because her hands are full thanks to a domestic situation back at home. Domestic. With his attention split by his concerns for his wife's commitments back on Earth, can Mr. Miracle hold his own against the minions of darkness? Now, for the comments from a critic about issue number 8. Critic is David Harth, and the website that his comments were published on was You Don't Read Comics. Quote, "Another thing is that while on Apocalypse, Scott keeps pushing himself harder and harder, getting injured. It's war, so this sort of thing is expected. But would a commander lead from the front? Would a commander repeatedly put himself into life and death situations? In some cases, yes, but not every case, and especially not if they just had a child. Does Scott have a subconscious death wish? And if so, why?" That's an interesting question. I think, though, it's obscured a little bit because the way that the war is presented, it seems to be a combination of modern war, including the assassination of a war commander by Scott Free, the very first page, and then also a combination of medieval battle, the way they have the two commanders fight in the battles decided by the resolution of the battle, the combat, the battles decided by the resolution of the combat between the two chieftains or the two commanders, and in this case Scott Free loses, so they have to retreat from the battlefield. And as I mentioned earlier, that because it's a superhero comic book, we tend to view it in that genre, but that if you actually look at it as a courtroom intrigue story, a plot of courtroom intrigue, it makes a lot more sense. And in this case, this is the medieval battle where the two commanders fight, and the battle's decided by the way the battle is resolved. And I think again and again, it's a mix of this sort of fantasy tale with a modern day satire on celebrity and the way media creates celebrities and influences the public perception of celebrities. It is very postmodern in that way, this comic book, how it blends several genres, and the writer Tom King also likes to blend tones. So you're not getting just one thing with this comic. I think rarely it's probably pablum to say you read something or watch a movie and you get just one thing. Usually there are other things going on, but especially in this case with this work, there is a dedicated effort on the writer to mix styles and tones and genres that is missing in other works. It's what makes it unique. And so that's the perfect segue into discussing the writing of the story. And as I alluded to before about the combat, there are two themes in this issue, and this dovetails with the art. The first theme is addressed with the color red, and it has to do with the brutality of war. And the second theme is that of the domesticity, and that's detailed using the color blue. That theme is expressed through the color blue. And so I can show you an example here within these 2 pages. These specific 2 pages detail both the home and the war, and so you can see on the left that Funky Flashman's outfit is in blue, and earlier, many of Scott Free's outfits in this issue, the comic book logos are blue. They're drawn on blue. This particular case, no, but throughout the issue, it's a common theme. Even Superman, we get the blue Superman. And then on the war, you can see all those red tones. And I'm going to guess because red is a color of blood and violence. That's why Mitch Gerads decided to go with that color scheme. And we will return to the art. And so, as I already mentioned about the assassin scene, let's bring that up. It's the very first page. The assassin scene contrasts with the sort of chivalrous combat resolved by the leaders, because assassination is a dirty business. It has none of the glory that used to be associated with war, and also it's not something we expect in a superhero, a mainstream superhero, where there is the code of never taking a life. So that's one way that Tom King can emphasize that these are no ordinary superheroes, the new gods. They're gods, and so they fundamentally operate on a different level, and their world is the world of intrigue, the world of battle between planets in this case. And so the normal rules for superheroes don't apply. But at the same time, in contrast, we get all the scenes of the mundane, day-to-day triumphs and tribulations of being a new parent. Don't normally see the juxtaposition of those two things, war and raising a family. Now to return, since we're here, page 2, to the return to the themes of blue, you can see Funky Flashman, his outfit is blue. The mug that says I am God is in blue. I don't think we can zoom in close enough for that. Not quite. The lighting is not going to let it show up. You can kind of see where it says I am God. And one thing I want to point out about this color blue, the theme of color blue, if you can recall that in the first issue, Scott talks to Barda and says, well, I thought your eyes were blue. And Barda says, what are you talking about, Scott? My eyes have always been brown. And the first outfit worn by Funky Flashman is yellow and green, the same color as Mr. Miracle's outfit, green and yellow, or red and yellow. It's not blue. And we apparently see that Funky Flashman is killed by Big Barda in issue number 4. No, issue number 5. However, here he reappears. There's no explanation for his reappearance. And Barda's eyes change the color blue in issue 7, last issue. I meant to mention it in my review before, but it's still relevant here. After they have the baby, that's when her eyes change color. So that act of creation seems to have freed Scott from the trap, the mental trap, the purgatory he had been in before, where nothing seems real. It's all kind of an illusion that he seems to be stuck in after a suicide attempt. But now that there has been this act of creation, he seems to have escaped the trap, invented something new, and now the realm of life and death. In creating, it just occurred to me, in creating a new life, now Scott has transcended life and death, which is what he always meant to do before. And someone who had been dead before, Funky Flashman, is now alive again. And that might be the clue that he has escaped death, that through his bond with Barda and expressing the expression of love that it represents, they have been able to beat the anti-life equation through creating life. And so the trap that was created by Scott succumbing to the anti-life equation, his bond with Barda has broken that trap. He's escape that trap. But he's still stuck kind of in a parallel universe, which is something we will address later in the series. Continuing for the writing. Scott is defeated while Barda sees her OBGYN. So the seriousness of him losing combat is undercut by the humor of Barda being the one who was originally supposed to do the combat, and the whole combat is comedic. Scott never has a chance. It's 9 panels of him being manhandled by the opponent. Darkseid, we see Darkseid, but he's just kind of looming in the shadows. We don't, he doesn't appear to Scott personally. He's just kind of a looming monolith, and he never says or does anything. You almost have to wonder. It's very otherworldly. Like, he doesn't ever move from that position that we see him there. He's just kind of hulking in the background. It's very bizarre. I'm going to guess it is Darkseid. It's not an illusion. It's not like a spaceship. It's Darkseid, but he doesn't do anything but just stand there. It's very dissociative, and I think that was intended. No Barda throughout the issue till the very end. Just Scott and surrogate mothers, in this case Funky Flashman being a surrogate mother, and there's the woman in the park kind of serving as a surrogate mother. And now to talk about the art of the issue. And now let's focus on the art. So one thing that's different in this issue is that there are no masks, no stipple design, no wipes, no attempt to put any sort of layers on top of the artwork like there were in the previous issues. No dirtying the artwork that way. He makes it very clean. Mitch Gerads does this case, in this issue, as opposed to some of the other issues. Very clean, and he tries to focus on very bright colors with tones of those colors, and that's expressed most plainly in the war panels. We can see here red, dark red, purples. And then, in opposition to that, are the scenes at home. And here he does something interesting he hasn't really done before, and that he's been using very plain backgrounds, so just using colors or simple designs. And in this one, he abstracts even further. And it's, to me, reminiscent of Chuck Jones, some of the kind of space age illustration he would do for like Duck Dodgers and 24th and a half century, where it's the most basic design, not even filled in on some of the objects in the scene. And Mitch Gerads does something very similar here. So this scene with Funky Flashman and Scott Free and the baby, see that pattern on the wall in the back? It's just boxes. He just draws white boxes. And this is the most I can zoom in, unfortunately. But I think you can kind of pick it up. And let's move down. And yeah, you can see that wallpaper design just is protein, as simple basic of design as you can be. Just white lines on that orange background. And what this does, in a way, he does it again too when the baby begins to walk. Yeah, look at this chair. It's white lines with like turquoise blue to fill in the chair, and that's all. And one thing it does is it abstracts the background so that we focus on the characters. And another thing it does is it makes it kind of a little unreal, which adds to the series, the flavor of the series, the theme of the series of reality always being in question. And another thing it does is that the war scenes, in contrast, seem more real because the details filled in a little more. See those bodies on the ground? they're not excruciatingly detailed, but there's more than one. There are more than one color. There's more than one color on those bodies. They're filled in a little more. We can recognize them as individual, not just lines that represent a chair. So I think in some ways it's making the war more vivid, the details of that war more vivid, and the details of the home life more iconic, more general. And I think that that's a good way, a good way that a good technique to bring out maybe themes in the writing that the writer didn't put in. Because during the war scenes, Tom King is often contrasting them with humor and playing them for opposite effect, where the artwork here is actually bringing out that gory detail and the realism. And the home scenes are played more realistic, where the art becomes more abstract. So rather than fighting against each other, I think these opposing tones add complexity. And now finally the bios. So let's go over the two bios. And my last review, I went over two of the members of the Female Furies. So here for this review, let's do the other two members of the Female Furies. You may have recalled my last review, I had the DC Character Guide, the newly released DC Character Guide. I used the photo information for the Female Furies from that, so I'm just going to use the same photo again. I believe it's a Nick Darrington drawing. And so now we're going to go over Stampa and Mad Harriet. And in this picture, Mad Harriet is labeled number 4, and Stampa is labeled number 1. So Mad Harriet, number 4. Go. Mad Harriet is a disturbed woman who has power spikes on her hands that emit energy. She was raised by Granny Goodness and chosen for the Female Furies because of her violent streak. Oh, well then, let's go back. Autofocus focused on me, which I don't mind, but we need to be focused on the picture of the Furies. And then Stampa, number 1, she's at the top. Stampa is the most powerful member of the Female Furies. She wears antimatter boots, which enable her to create devastating earthquakes and tremors by stomping on the ground. And the autofocus box is moving all over the place, sorry. Just had to refocus it again. That's it, all done. So I hope life finds you well, and that you will join me again for my next review when we'll do issue number 9. Okay, take care and be well. I'll see you again. Bye.